Hey gamers, I am the Bad Luck Gamer, and today is going to be GM tips on Table Talk. I'm super excited to get talking about this because GMing is what I do for the majority of my tabletop games. So, the GM or a game master, I prefer to call them the storyteller because the main objective of the GM of the storyteller is to convey a story to the players to make them feel involved in the world around them. So, today I'm going to give 5 tips. 5 tips. Camera's really zoomed in, so I apologize. Uh, on how to be a better GM, or at least some basic tips. There will be an advanced GM video probably a little later on. I'm also sorry I didn't upload a video yesterday. I worked all day and I don't even know if the video is actually going to get out today, and I just haven't been able to do any of my other videos for Final Fantasy 13 2. So I'm sorry if this is coming late to you guys. I'm sorry if there's anyone who really cares. Because anyway, so GM tips. First and foremost, as a GM, the most important thing for you to do is have a idea of the world you're living in, because the worst thing as a GM, well, especially for me, is not knowing what world you're in and getting confused at what should actually be happening. What kind of factions there are, what kind of enemies are common, just the general politics of an area. Is there racism between the races? Is some races being oppressed by another race? Make sure that you're knowledgeable enough on the world that you can do anything on the fly when your players go off track. Because I guarantee, unless you have very, I don't know, a very straightforward group that follows plot point to plot point, your players are going to do something that you don't expect. They're going to talk to someone, they're going to want to talk to someone. And if you're not ready for that, then it's going to bring them out of the immersion, and it's going to make them feel like they're out of sync with what's happening in the game. So as a GM, and this is going to rely on to step 2, one of the worst things that happen is for your players to lose interest and then start doing their own activities in the middle of a game. Now, I know, especially as being on the player side, it's really hard to stay involved, especially when stuff isn't happening around your character. So, as the GM, what you can do, and something that can kind of help keep the immersion with the people you're actually working with, is when players go off on their own, try to make sure that they go off alone in groups. What this does is this gives the characters chance to interact with each other. You tell them as a GM, you guys, try to be in character. But one of the more important things to do as a GM is separate the group actually. Move them to a different part of the room, move them out of the room. I recommend just moving them to a different part of the room, because if they want to hear what's happening, you want them to hear what's happening, unless it's a super secret. If it is a super secret, please take someone out of the room with you when you're giving the secret away, because it makes it more fun. But make sure that when people are off doing their own thing, make sure they do it in groups of at least 2. Separate them from everyone else, or put people in different groups. What this does is players who are actively participating aren't distracted by the players who aren't actively participating. But not only that, a little psychology, people who are moved away from the group will feel like they're missing out on something, and so they'll actually be more inclined to listen to what's happening. Number 3, and I'm going to try to actually edit these videos. I really should. I run out of time a lot because of work and stuff like that. But the third thing a GM should do is involve your players in the storyline. This is one of the more important ones, because if a player doesn't feel connected to what's happening, he has no reason to stick around. I think this is one of the biggest flaws of a lot of GMs or a lot of storytellers out there, is they kind of throw a group of people into their story, into the storyteller's story, and they expect the players to kind of connect to it, and that's not how it works. The story needs to evolve around the players. So if you're a really good storyteller and you're really good at improv, make a story about the characters. That way the characters feel more involved, they feel more connected to what's happening, and all in all, they are more likely to become, I guess, dedicated to the campaign. And that's what you want, because you want people to be involved with what's happening in the story, and you want the players to feel like their actions are impacting the world. So make the story about the characters. And this kind of runs into number 4, because when you're when you're making a story about the characters, what you want to do is make characters, NPCs, involved with the characters. Don't be afraid, unless the character is absolutely, set on being an orphan or a single child or whatever. Don't be afraid to throw a family member that they don't know about, but they do know about, into the story, because what this does is they're like, oh, well, there's someone I didn't know about my character. Oh, this is interesting. What do you have in mind, GM? This is a way of involving the player and keeping them intact. Plus, not only that, the player will be more interested in what's happening to this NPC. And that is really interesting. Now, you have to talk to your players about it, ask if there's any family, do stuff like that. But more than anything, if a player is okay with it, don't be afraid to just toss characters in at them and say that they know them somehow. Like, this is a guy you knew from military school. This is a guy you met at the Wizard Academy. Here's your father. That will make them instantly intrigued in what's happening, because it calls them into the story and demands their attention. And 5th, and the most important, because my lists go least to well, no, they just kind of go to the most important in the end. Somehow, I don't know. There is a method to my madness, I suppose. But when you are the GM, make characters for your game that the players can interact with. Players get absolutely bored when the world around them seems kind of dull and one character seeps into another character. If you're really bad at voices, this happens a lot. And I know I'm not the best at voices. I only have a small set of voices, and I have players saying all the time, oh, I didn't realize that person was talking. And I was like, I'm trying to do the voice. But make NPCs that the players want to interact with. Make enemies that the players want to interact with. Don't be afraid to get into character and embarrass yourself a little bit, but you're doing it for the sake of fun. If you're not having fun with it, then you're doing a game wrong. So, just make sure that the NPCs that the players are interacting with are characters of value, characters that the players will start to care about. Make sure that you play them. Now, not all NPCs in a game need to be, and this is super important, not all NPCs in your game need to be overly characterized. Now, this is hard for some people, but sometimes you can just tell a player, they tell you this. You can do it in the third person where you're like, well, you get information from the farmer. You don't have to be the farmer and tell them where they need to go. You actually can just do that for some of the more supplementary characters. But input characters into the game, play them out for the characters, and interact with them. Don't be afraid to act angry. Don't be afraid to be an asshole in the sake of keeping in character. So I hope these GM tips help. If anyone has any more tips they want to give out, please leave a message in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to give personal tips if you give me a message. And yeah, anyway, this is Bad Luck Gamer. Ciao for now. Good luck with whatever games you're running, storytellers, and I'll see you in the next episode.